So I've said it to a few of you, and I'll say it to the rest of you. Overwatch League Season 2 will test you as a person and as a fan, especially if this is your first esport, which I know that Overwatch is a lot of people's first esports. So welcome to the kind of pre-season 2 speculation threads, that are going to be popping up shortly within the coming months. Um, this is the roster mania, as people like to call it. In what that means is that every roster in the Overwatch League will probably see changes, and some of your favorite players will now be playing under new banners. And I wanted to just give a couple of predictions leading into this kind of crazy, nonsensical mess that we're about to dive straight into towards the end of Stage 4, with some of my kind of own crystal ball predictions. We'll kind of dive into some of them and add a little bit more context to them. But obviously, I'm not going to touch on every team because that would take hours and hours, and I can't be bothered. I'm going to be completely honest with you. There's a lot of predictions I can make, and maybe I'll make a second video, maybe I'll make a written piece. But as of right now, I've got just a couple points, maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7, to kind of go through and talk with you guys. So we're going to start off with kind of a banger. I think the Boston Uprising should make a play for Florida Mayhem's Saya player. Now, when we look at Boston post Dream Casper, they have a definite DPS hole they need to fill. Striker has shown to be a incredibly proficient, if not the best, Tracer player in the world, with kind of an off roll onto Junkrat if need be, and Mistakes has shown to be kind of a up and comer in the flex role, where he kind of is able to serviceably play a lot of different roles. Surprisingly enough, he actually has quite a decent Genji and a Widowmaker, but I think he needs to have a clear role, and I think adding Saya player to the roster gives him that role as a very dedicated projectile player. Now, Saya player has come from Meta Athena through and through, one of the best hit scan players, even in Apex Season 2 when they made their Royal Road run. He's on Florida Mayhem now and is doing incredibly well on a very mediocre team, or close to very bad team, however you want to take that. Saya player, like I said, one of the best in the world when it comes to hit scan, gives Mistakes a very clear and defined role, and could be, the replacement for Dream Casper that this team has been looking for. Next, we look at Seoul Dynasty. Seoul Dynasty is in desperate need of what? They need a main tank, and I've said this for a long time now, especially with my written piece, which I'll link somewhere, somehow, on Winston's Lab, when we look at the statistical performance of Miro and Kuki, where their ultimates have been in question, their positioning has been questionable, and now people are starting to come around and saying, wow, they really need a main tank, especially with Ryu Jae-hong stepping into the main tank role and kind of acting as a band-aid to kind of hopefully push this team towards the playoffs, which, as of recording this, it's not necessarily likely, but it's still a possibility. So we'll have to see exactly what happens, because they're not in a great place. Now, the context to this is not going to be clear until I get into the next point, but I think Seoul needs to make a play for an incredibly strong main tank. And the one main tank that I think is going to be free during the postseason is going to be Gesture from the London Spitfire. Seoul needs Gesture as much as Gesture needs Seoul. Gesture is easily one of the best main tanks in the world. I don't think anybody's going to dispute that too much. Comes from GC Busan, the Royal Roaders in Apex Season 4, APAC 2017 winners. I don't think there's a ton to be said there. Just very, very strong, mechanical tank player. Very team-driven, not necessarily so dynamic as someone like Fissure, where he kind of dictates the pace of the team. He is kind of very malleable and can kind of fit into whatever Seoul wants to do with him. Whereas I think Fissure probably is a little bit more jarring to the rest of the team. I think Gesture not necessarily is the more team-oriented player, but I think, like I said, he's a little bit more flexible and can adapt to a ton of different styles. But he needs a stable roster to play with. And I think that Seoul is really looking for a strong leader in the main tank role, somebody to play alongside Zunba, somebody to fill out this roster, because it's a glaring hole, especially within the Stage 4 metagame where tanks are so important. Now that only makes sense when I get into the next point, where I think London, as the sole European representative, will implode and a lot of their players will be jettisoned to other teams. Where exactly they go, that's up for debate. But I think they probably retain some superstars like Hago and Prophet. I think Birdring. I think a lot of those rest of the guys, I think most of the support line is going to be jettisoned to other teams. And London will kind of resurface with a brand new roster. Whether or not it includes some European talent, I would love to see that, because I think that Season 2 is going to be the kind of the testing grounds now that everybody has gotten a feel for the format. There's probably going to be new format issues coming into Season 2. Is there more travel involved? Who knows? But I think London definitely needs to restructure and refix this roster, because when you throw two incredibly strong teams together, your potential skyrockets through the roof. I don't think anybody would debate the fact that London didn't have the potential leading into the first season of the Overwatch League to be one of the best teams. When you look at Kongdu Panthera's history and heritage, and we look at GC Busan's history and heritage, you slap those two teams together, you look at Prophet and Birdring and the amazing tanks that they have. Why didn't this team flourish? And I think that's going to kind of accentuate itself in this postseason. I think there's going to be lots of drama, and this team will supernova in a very fiery fashion. And we'll see, exactly what kind of London roster comes out of that supernova, which will be kind of interesting, because I think that they have a lot of options, being the only European organization so far announced. That could change Season 2, who knows. The next point, obviously, Shanghai, which I have talked about in a previous video, which I'll link somewhere up here. I think they definitely need to kind of find their lane when it comes to what they want to do with this team, because I think that the Korean imports have proven to be incredibly beneficial. When you look at Otto, Fearless, and Giguri, they have been very, very important to this team, but they kind of are responsible for the kind of decline in Overwatch's success in China, being obviously the only Chinese representatives in the Overwatch League's first season. So I think they have two very clear paths to take. Do they go full Korean with kind of a smattering of Chinese players, or do they just go full Chinese and invest back into their own scene and kind of re-kickstart that Chinese engine that I think a lot of people know that's in the populace, but I think they just need that better representation. Now, that's not to mention, the fact that there could be other Chinese team or cities that could come in and do the same thing, but I think Shanghai just needs to figure out exactly what they want to do, because something isn't working and they need to change something, whether it be the coaching staff or just better, just, you might as well just implode the whole thing and just restart from scratch, because I think people just need to have their eyes bleached of this potential 0-40 record. I don't think that's good for anybody. I don't think it's good for the league. I don't think it's good for the Chinese scene. I don't think it's good for Overwatch to have somebody legitimately just not win anything. Next on the list, Florida Mayhem. This is kind of contentious, and I think a lot of people will be not argumentative, but I think that this will probably upset some of the Los Angeles Gladiators fans. But I think Florida needs to make a play or a very large bid for the Los Angeles Gladiators support line, which consists of Big Goose and Shaz, which are have been two of the best support players to come out of Europe. And I think that if Florida wants to be that kind of European core, or wants to maintain that European core, I think that it's a no-brainer to kind of take the supportive line from LAG and import them over to your team, because if I'm going to be completely honest, and there have been a couple other people to kind of mimic or echo these same points, Florida's biggest issue has been kind of their support line. Zebosai has been one of the more loved players on the team, but do his skill sets necessarily match that of what an Overwatch League caliber player is kind of needed of? I don't think so. And I think that the support line for Florida definitely needs to have an overhaul, and I think that LAG kind of is a no-brainer for me. I think that this probably would have been a long time coming, and I think that's actually going to level up the team quite a bit. I would love to see Zebo stay within this team as a supportive kind of cast, or in the supportive role. but outside of the server as like a coach or an analyst or just a kind of team buddy, if you will. Next one, we're going to be journey. We're going to take a journey up to the tri-state area, and we're going to be talking about New York Excelsior. Now, obviously, the big question is, what are they going to be doing with Flower? What exactly? Where is he going? Who kind of is shed from the team, or is Flower even going to be playing for this team? And I have to err on the side of the fact that Flower has a lot of loyalty to this team, it feels like, and it feels like he wants to play for this team no matter what. And I think that they want to play with him as well. So I think the only other person I think you could shed, especially when you look at the DPS role, is Libero. He has less time spent with the team historically, and could be an incredibly pivotal member in any other Overwatch League franchise, whether it be a expansion team or just a mainstay team that we've met through Season 1. But I think that Flower probably will not be exiting the New York Excelsior anytime soon. I think that they have a similar hero pool, but I think that Flower has much more explosive potential than Libero. I think Libero has been amazing on this team, but I think that they're going to kind of try to look to offload him for a pretty penny, looking, seeing how he is, has quite a few stage titles to his name and could be, at the time of recording this, the Overwatch League hasn't finished yet. Season 1 hasn't finished, but he could be a Season 1 champion. So, I think they're going to be looking to offload Libero to a potential expansion team, maybe, Korea team number 2, maybe Busan, whoever, team decides to pop up in South Korea. But I think Libero will fetch a very nice prize for New York. But I think that Flower's probably going to stay with that team. And then we have the Dallas Fuel, who, unsurprisingly, I have to say, will probably, again, follow the London route of supernovaing in a continuous drama fashion. They'll probably expunge quite a few of their players and look to rebuild around a few players who I will kind of highlight as not necessarily players, but I think first we have to talk about the coaching staff. I think that Arrow should be maintained, especially if he has a great stage 4. Which it looks like he's definitely changing this team for the better, just from the first couple weeks. Having done an interview with him and spoken with him before, I think he has a great head on his shoulders. If you look at some of his content on YouTube, he has a very clear structure of what he wants teams to look like, and I think he could definitely can be a coach in the Overwatch League, and I think that if given full free reign to recruit, other support staff members and to kind of control the roster, I think that would be incredibly beneficial. Now, another 2 kind of players who I'd like to see retained would be Seagull and Chips for different reasons. Seagull obviously brings you that kind of overstated value of being, a very big character in the community. Obviously, he's been there since the beginning and has been incredibly popular, not only as a streamer, but as just an outward-facing community member with, multiple written pieces about him, different interviews and whatnot. But I think that he could really be that kind of outward-facing person for this team as kind of like a team captain. But not only that, because, that is overstated a lot, that he's kind of this fan favorite, which is fine. That's great. And I think that's a value, that's an asset that Dallas can look at. But the fact that he's been incredibly dedicated to this team, being signed as kind of a projectile role and then flexing to Diva and off tanks, and now coming back to projectile and going back to Diva, he has a very wide hero pool and is very dedicated to this team, and has stated, especially pre-Overwatch League, that he does want to compete, and it's not really necessarily about the money to him. He does want to compete. Has a great mind for the game. I think that any team would be glad to have him, and I think that Dallas is going to want to keep him around and want to build around him and at Chips. I think Chips kind of gives them their ties to Team Envious, not to mention the fact that I think he still has a lot to prove, and I think he has a lot of potential to live up to that hasn't been met throughout this first season of the Overwatch League. Because when you look at Dallas in Stage 1, everybody was sick. You're having XQC kind of get his kind of deal in order, which ultimately resulted in his expulsion from the team. And the team never really recovered past that, and I think that really hurt Chips as a kind of support member. And I think that his potential really never kind of came to fruition when it came to that first season. So I think that he still has a ton to live up for and has a lot of potential to kind of build. And then to fill out the roster, again, I think that Europe is going to be an incredibly undervalued scene, and you probably can get a lot of amazing European players for very, very cheap. Not to say that they're like, bargain players, but I think that most of the North American players have been kind of picked through, or they're just too young. And I think Europe is the kind of next bastion of just tier 1 talent that you can bring over and start to kind of foster under the minds of Siegel, Arrow, and Chips. So with that said, I think that that's kind of what I would like to see coming into Season 2 of the Overwatch League. Like I said, there's plenty of other speculation videos that I could make. So if you do like this and would like to see me make another one with more LA Gladiators, San Francisco Shock, and just kind of talking about other teams that could be or could not be in Season 2, let me know down below. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. And follow me on Twitter if you want to follow my thoughts. So thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.